Don't look at the Mardu player to be counterspelling red cards.
Welcome to another great game of Cedh. I'm super excited for Commander Seals this upcoming weekend. Make sure to swing by the booth, and if you mention Real, you'll get 10% off your order. Starting us off is Luke on Tymna Dargo. Mardu Summer might be back as this fast turbo list aims to sack a bunch of stuff and combo off with either Dargo or Underworld Breach. Next up is Gabe on Tymna Malcolm, aiming to generate advantage through both commanders while controlling the board at instant speed before assembling a Thoracle win. In the third spot is Ruben on Magda. This is Mighty Morphin Dwarfs, aiming for lots of treasure and an instant speed tunable win con. And bringing up the rear is Fernando on Choco, Seeker of Paradise. Bant Bird Stax is not a phrase I thought I would have ever had said, but this is a landfall stack deck, aiming to slow the game down while pressuring your opponent's life total.
Alright, block there, kill that. Oh, that is trample. Guess I'm just dead on board.
Gabe has a pregame action as he puts a Gemstone Caverns into play, exiling a Tainted Pact. Luke starts off the game proper with an Arid Mesa. He'll then fetch out a Plateau for a turn 1 Esper Sentinel. Gabe has an island into a Mox Opal. He gives a card to Luke as Gabe then passes it there. Ruben has a mountain and casts an Enslaved Dwarf. Fernando shocks in a Temple Garden and casts a Sol Ring. Luke draws as Fernando follows it up with a Cursed Totem. Luke plays out an Ancient Den and for 2 casts a Talisman of Indulgence. He then moves to combat to send the Esper at Fernando, as he then moves to his second main to take a point of damage to cast a Ragavan, with Gabe at end step flashing in a Fairy Mastermind. Gabe heads straight to combat and sends his Fairy at Fernando as well, but passes once again with mana open. Ruben plays out a Survivor Encampment as land and casts his Commander Magda. Combat is next as Fernando continues to take the punishment, as the buffed Enslaved Dwarf heads his way, making Ruben a treasure on attack with Fernando taking the hit. Fernando has an untapped Rejuvenating Springs as he attempts to slow the game down with a Phyrexian Censor. Luke unfortunately is lamenting his lack of Phyrexians, as for 3 he casts his Commander Tymna, who will enter tapped as Luke then moves to combat. He sends the Esper at Ruben and the Ragavan at Gabe. Both players take the hit as Luke makes a treasure and exiles a Mockingbird off the top. Luke will leave that in exile as he moves to his second main to pay 2 life to draw 2 off Tymna, triggering the Fairy Mastermind in the process, with Gabe at end step flashing in an Archivist of Ogma, with Luke discarding a Final Fortune and an Impulsive Pilferer due to hand size. Looks like Luke isn't the only one struggling with his land drops, as Gabe then casts a tapped Siren Stormtamer, ending his turn sending his Fairy once again at Fernando. Ruben plays out a Treasure Vault and ends the combat. He full sends at Fernando and makes 2 treasures off their taps, with a confused Fernando sending his Censor to block Magda, with Ruben in response bolting the Phyrexian to keep his commander alive, with Ruben then heading to his second main to cast the Springleaf Drum into a Mana Vault. Fernando plays out an Aganjo as land for turn, and needing more blockers casts his commander Choco. Luke continues to miss on land as he encores his Pilferer. He'll make 3 tokens and then heads to combat, sending Tymna, Ragavan, and the Pilferer at Ruben, with the other 2 Pilferers heading at Gabe and Fernando respectively. Both Gabe and Fernando will block as Ruben takes the hit. Luke will make a total of 3 treasures as he exiles an Adaptive Automaton off the top of Ruben's library. Luke will then pay a life to draw off Tymna, with Gabe also getting a draw off his Fairy. Luke will then crack a treasure for a Mana Vault, which is then tapped for a Talisman of Hierarchy into a Goblin Bombardment. But that's too much for Gabe as he swan songs it, with Luke then ending his turn casting his Commander Dargo, with the 1 Pilferer left sacrificing itself at end step for another treasure. Gabe has a Crystal Veins as land for turn as he then casts a Talisman of Progress. This will give a card to Luke off the Esper as Gabe then follows that up with a Voice of Victory, ending his turn sending his Fairy and Archivist at Ruben for 4. Ruben then plays out an Urza Saga and gets his first lore counter. He'll then use his Survivor's Encampment to tap down Magda for a red mana and another treasure, using the floating red to help cast an Imperial Recruiter. The Recruiter resolves as Ruben grabs out a Go-Go Mysterious Mime, with Gabe gaining a life to draw off his Archivist. Ruben then casts the tutored creature as he heads to combat and makes Gogo into Magda. He can then swing the enslaved dwarf and Gogo Magda at Gabe to make 4 treasures off their tap. Gabe will block the enslaved dwarf, but at the time we didn't realize that it should have been double buffed due to having a second Magda. Ruben then moves to his second main and for 3 casts a Blundering Barbarian, who on ETB will blow up the Cursed Totem. Ruben will then sacrifice 5 treasures to the Magda's ability to search out an artifact. There are still no answers, but luckily for the table, he doesn't have the win just yet, as he finds a portal to Phyrexia to have everyone sacrifice 3 creatures. Fernando has a tap Field of the Deads and casts a Mystic Remora. He'll pay the 1, but Luke will respond as he casts an Enlightened Tutor, although Gabe is quick with a mental misstep to stop the tutor. Granted, Luke does get a draw off his Esper this time. The fish then resolves, as Fernando then follows it up with a Sanctum Prelate, naming 2 as it enters. Luke will untap and take 1 from his tap mana vault. Unfortunately, he doesn't really have much interaction for Magda, as Fernando offers up a free attack with his Esper. Luke will take the deal and swing Tymna at Gabe and the Esper at Fernando. There are no blocks, as Luke will then pay 2 life to draw off Tymna, giving another card to Gabe in the process. Unfortunately, Luke is still missing land drops, as he then casts a Yawgmoth, Thran Physician, into a Goblin Welder, hoping to at least put a little bit of a speed bump to Magda, as he sacrifices the Welder to Yawg to draw and take Magda out for now, passing after that, and discarding a Cabal Ritual and a Trouble in Pairs. Gabe plays out a Tundra as land for turn and casts a Dark Ritual. He gives both Fernando and Luke cards, as Gabe then casts his Commander Malcolm, and then his Commander Tymna. Gabe will then head to combat and sends his Fairy at Luke, who doesn't block, as Gabe on his second main will pay a life to draw off Tymna, hinting to the table he might have found something to help against the Magda. Ruben untaps and uses his portal to grab Gabe's Voice of Victory. He'll lose a life to his tap mana vault and then gains his second Saga counter, with Ruben on his first main casting a Gloin, as he's actually a bit short on mana and looks like he wants 1 more turn of setup before he goes for it. Fernando will untap and pays for his fish, as he plays out a Windswept Heath and passes it there. Luke will lose 1 on his tap vault and then goes into the tank.
Are we still letting people draw extra cards?
Yeah, you know, you draw, I draw, we all draw. We're playing Arch Enemy right now, so I mean, it's kind of in our best interest.
Okay.
As Luke then sends Tymna at Gabe and the Esper Sentinel back at Fernando. There are once again no blocks, as Luke will pay 2 to draw off Tymna, once again giving a card to Gabe as well. Luke still hasn't found a land, as he casts a Chrome Mox. Fernando will draw as Luke imprints a Pyroblast and then a Mox Opal. He gives Fernando and Gabe another card draw. Luke then casts his own Voice of Victory, as he then follows it up with a Gamble. Fernando draws as Luke goes searching for a card to hand, with Luke then randomly discarding an Underworld Breach. Luke will then take 1 of his Talisman for a red, as he sacrifices 4 artifacts to recast his Commander Dargo. He'll then follow that up with a Burnt Offering on the Dargo. Fernando draws, with Luke then making 7 black mana off the ritual, which is enough to let him cast a Peer into the Abyss. Fernando draws, but there's still no response, as Luke will lose half his life and draw 35 cards. Luke then has a Mox Amber into an Ancient Tomb, and yes, Fernando is going to be drawing off all these cards. Luke then takes 2 to cast a Soul Ring into an LED. He then continues with a Savine's Reclamation, targeting the Underworld Breach that Fernando so conveniently had him discard. And with the gamble to grab a Pyro to finish off the fish, and half the deck in his hand, the table will scoop it up, giving Luke the game. Game review. Man, doesn't it feel great when there aren't a million counterspells flying around? Granted, the table was sweating on Ruben's turn. There also was an argument that he should have left Magda in the grave to rebuy it with this portal, but Luke did have another Yawg sacrifice to let him kill the Magda before he could have gotten another activation. And the fear of Ruben definitely was what lowered Gabe's and Fernando's guard to let Luke slip in his own voice and go for the win. Thanks to everyone that joined for the game, and before everyone leaves, I want to thank our special Patreon members, Sly Fox and Holy Septic, for their support of the channel, along with all of our other Patreon supporters as well. And remember, never give up even if you're dead on board. I'll see you guys later.